Okay. Should we warn whoever's tuned in, or we'll just go for it?
Well, we're starting with Tanya.
Yeah. We're going to repeat last week's shiur because the recording got tripped up. Okay. In the previous recorded shiur, we left off by discussing the Alter Rebbe's revolutionary insight to Avodas Hashem, that as opposed to what we're used to thinking of two Yitzarim, two Yetzers, I'm going to give the same shiur as last time. Just there might be nuances, and hopefully, it says Divrei Torah Ashir b'makam echad v'ani b'makam acher. So maybe you say the same thing twice and it comes out differently and more internalized. So the chiddush, the innovation is that there's two souls and not just two yetzers, two inclinations. That the yetzer, each yetzer has its root deeper in like a whole consciousness of a nefesh, a whole structure, an essential structure. So in other words, it's not that, let's say the classic, the diet I'll start the diet tomorrow. So at night, it feels like I'm sick and tired of how I've been eating and how I feel physically. And tomorrow we'll start. So I'm thinking that in the morning, I'm going to have a clear head. And I'm going to feel exactly like I feel right now. And then consequently, I'm going to eat properly. I'm going to have a wonderful, perfect day, and the next day, and the next day. That's not giving proper respect to where the battle actually lies. The battle lies much deeper. There are layers and layers and layers. The battle doesn't lie at mealtime. The battle lies way before mealtime. How I'm going to approach a meal. Am I going to approach it based on health considerations or based on desire considerations? Right? I know that when I get hungry, the ugly beast inside is going to want, you forgive me for this, yeah? Amnon. Is going to want the French fries and the fried foods and so on and so forth, right? If I wait, if I say, you know what, the battle starts when that desire comes. That's like a yetzer. Then I think there's a yetzer towards good eating and bad eating, and when the yetzer shows up, I'll defeat him. But if I realize it's a nefesh, this is all a mashal, because this is not really Avodas Hashem necessarily, this is just being healthy. But if I realize the battle's much deeper, it's my whole approach, my outlook on what food is and how I approach it. That will actually change how I feel about it. That when it comes time to eat, I may still have that desire, but there's something deeper inside of me, a deeper desire to be a healthy person. And therefore, since I want that outcome, when the desire shows up for eating unhealthily, I've already defeated it before it showed up. Either I'm ready to fight it, because I remember I have an imprint of my original thinking, when I actually convinced my world outlook so that the relationship with food is not about taste, but it's about energy and clean energy and so on. Just like I wouldn't feed my car olive oil or vinegar. I'd only feed it what's proper for it. I won't do that to my body. So even though if there's an imprint of that, when I have the desire to eat unhealthily, I'll be able to overcome that desire, or I will so internalize the message of what food is that I'll actually only desire food that's good for the body. That's a whole nother level. So, lahavdil, what the Alter Rebbe is saying is there's two nefashis, there's two souls, there's two full structures of identity in the person. He's about to introduce us to one of them. One is called the Klippa soul, which we'll talk about, and one is called the Godly soul, which we'll talk about in the next chapter. Meaning one soul's whole identity, not a yetzer, not that later when I'm hungry I'm going to want to eat according to desire, not according to some godly end. But its whole structure, its whole world view is based on pleasure and not based on connection to something higher than itself. And then in other words, it has an intellect part to it. It's a world view. It has a embedded love and desire for things that fit with its world view. And therefore, it has those actual practical desires when the food gets in front of him or whatever challenge gets in front of him. And if I realize that, and I can, one of the ways to defeat that is to explain to that animal side of myself what true goodness really is. Just like in the analogy that if I explain to my body that what's really good for you is not taste, what's really good for you is clean energy, it should have an effect. If my godly side explains to my animal side what's really good for you is a relationship with the divine and beyond the physical plane and beyond whatever strange desires I might have, should have an effect. Okay, that's the basic premise. Now we get introduced to the animal soul. For those who are counting at home, we're on page Hey Amud Beis, side 2, aka page 10. Okay. So why do we mention this? Why do we mention these two souls? Because when we understand a lot about these two souls and their interplay, we understand their makeup and their interplay, then we will be able to understand who really is this Beinoni that we're looking for. And don't forget, this is the book of the Beinoni, of the intermediate man, meaning of the average man. Of everyday man can reach very high spiritual heights in his connection to Hashem, even in Ubelavavcha, even in his heart. He can actually control his desires. So first we have to understand what makes us tick. And the Rachav says, in the writings of the Rizal, Rav Chaim Vital says, these two souls, which the Alter Rebbe has explained, are at battle. And here we go. Towards the bottom of the page, it says, Achas, one of the souls, Mitzad Klipa v'Sitra Achra, comes from Klipa and Sitra Achra. So Klipa, so the words, there's more than two words, but essentially two words for the other side. Sitra Achra is the other side, describing not Kedusha, as we'll explain better in Perek Vav in chapter 6. And Klipa. And Klipa means a shell. So when you take something for its external, you don't relate to its internal. So let's go back to our good example of food. I'm saying the camera's this way, but everybody on the other side is eating. So I apologize to the crowd and whoever's eating dinner at home. A klipa food, external food, the externality of the food is taste, smell, sight. So look good, smell good, taste good. And if I connect to that, not necessarily, that's the external. I need that in order to ingest it. To make, Hashem did us a favor to make our sustenance covered in something that we can swallow. Okay, but if I'm looking at the pneumius, I'm looking beyond the outer shell, the real goodness of food is the energy that it gives me. So if I can relate to something deeper, then I have a better relationship with food than if I'm relating just the external. Okay, so Hashem now we're talking about godliness and klipa. Hashem, everything in the world has godliness. It can't exist unless Hashem is making it exist. That's its godly soul. Everything has a soul. Even a rock has a soul. Just to be existing, Hashem brings it out of nothingness into somethingness and maintains its existence, which is the whole subject of Book 2 of Tanya. That's the soul of every living thing, of every existing thing. But klipa means that I get a little bit caught up or completely caught up in the shell. Just like on a shell of something, if you don't know what a banana is, you might think you don't even know there's food here. You have to discover it and happen upon it by peeling off the shell and seeing the sweet fruit and beneficial, healthy fruit inside, or an egg or anything like that. So being stuck with the external covers on the benefit. So what klipa means is that the godliness, which is per force inside of everything that exists, is not readily accessible. It doesn't shine. Okay? So that's klipa, and that's the other side. What's the other side of kedusha? The other side of holiness is covered on holiness. It doesn't realize its godly existence, its godly goal, end, and so on. So this klipa, one soul that every human has, every Jew has, comes from klipa and sitra achra. It's a klipa soul, meaning this soul, when it recognizes itself, not godliness. Like if I recognize food for the external, I recognize taste, not energy. So it doesn't recognize its godliness, it only recognizes some self-natural identity. This is the vitalizing, it's the one that dresses up in the blood. Blood is the life force of living beings. It flows through the veins and through the body. If, God forbid, circulation is cut off, you can have what's called a dead limb, and you have to be even removed because it can infect the rest of the body because it's connected to death, God forbid. So blood is the life force. There's vitality in the blood, the actual something you can't touch with the five senses. It's spiritual. It's a life force. The difference between a living entity and a dead entity, a living cat. In Tsfat we have a lot of live cats, and you can see a dead cat once in a while. There's no distinction between the two of them that's palpable to the hands or to the, well, after a few minutes, or it could be smell, right? Or hands becomes hard and so on. But that instant between life and death, you can see the vitality is gone, but you can't point to vitality. You can't tell me what color it is, how much it weighs. It doesn't exist in terms it's spiritual. So that vitality that flows through the veins of a person, it comes from what's called a vitalizing soul. It's a nefesh habahamis, an animal, fleshy soul. Here he calls it a fleshy soul. Like the Pasuk says, Ukedichsiv, ki nefesh habasar b'damhi, because the fleshy soul is in the blood. That's a Pasuk. Meaning there's a vitalizing soul of the body. The natural soul, sometimes called the natural soul, which will be important in a moment. And from it comes, from this vitalizing soul, it's made up of four negative attributes, which are made up of the four negative elements. So in Torah talks about the Rambam, in Sefer Hakira, philosophy, and Kabbalah, talks about the four elements. Not to say that these are the smallest particles in existence, but everything is made up of these four. They are the classic earth, wind, water, and fire. And depending on the mizug, lost the word here. Or how they're blended together, okay, makes the character of the person. This is the natural soul. So there's the argument in the philosophical and science world of nature versus nurture, and of course the conclusion is it's both. Everybody has a certain nature, and that nature dictates a lot of his own personality and behavior. We're talking here about the natural character of a person, from just having a vitalizing soul. Since a soul and everything is made up of these four elements, so every character is made up of these four, and depending on your mizug, and your what did I say before? The mixture of these elements is your character. So some people will see the character traits, we're calling them evil character traits. They're called evil because they cover up ungodliness and they're self-involved. So we're going to have taiva as one, because we're talking about a lot of food, and now we're done eating, so we can talk about it freely and together. Lusting for things just for pleasure's sake. That can get you lost very easily. Right? Go back to our food one last time for the day. And I promise you I will bring up food many, many more times over the first 6 chapters. 7 chapters actually. Go back to our food one last time for the day. The lust for the external, for food, it obviously can lead a person astray. Right? If I'm in it for just the desire, so that's not healthy. It's not healthy physically. It's not healthy mentally, financially. Right? You're just lost. There's no value system other than the desire. Whereas what if I desire health? Actually, that's also not actually the best. Right? Sometimes there are things that trump eating in a healthy way. I might have to run. I'm on the run to go help somebody who's in need. But no, I didn't have my balanced meal. So obviously there's a value system here. But if I'm stuck in lust, it's never going to go well. There's a character who's angry by nature. There's a character who's timid by nature. Some people are more outgoing. Some people more. A lot of it is nurture, but a lot of it is nature. So here we're saying that it comes from this vitalizing soul. There's an animal soul, animalistic vitalizing soul, that enlivens every single one of us and makes up our natural character. So here the Alter Rebbe describes. So, dehainu, meaning, kas v'gaiva mi'yisei da'esh sheneg b'lamayla. Anger and haughtiness come from the element of fire, because the nature of fire is hot. That's hot-headed, like angry. And it goes up, like haughtiness. It feels higher than everybody else. Superior. So he lifts himself up. Those are negative character traits, obviously. Delights, physical delights, which come from the water of the soul. Water is connected to delight, as it makes the fruits sweeter. The growths of fruit of the tree makes them sweet, and the desire of the sweetness of fruit, or anything juicy. I said I want to mention food again, but the French fries that I saw on the other side. If once they cool off and they become dry, right? I see the faces, especially after we're done eating. Like you don't want to eat them anymore. But when there's the greasy and so on, so there's a certain taiva in them. Okay, so water and juiciness is the element that draws you to tainug, to delight, to taiva rather. V'ha'ilalus v'leitzanus v'isparus v'dvarim b'teidim yisei ruach. So scoffing and frivolousness and boasting and just stam talking about nothing, wasting time, like speech about nothing. You ever been in one of those conversations?
Yeah.
It's pretty often, right? We all take part in those conversations. That comes from Yisei Ruach. It has no substance. So here he mentions, like air, there's no real substance to it. So here he mentioned boasting. So the difference between boasting and haughtiness, which was mentioned by fire, is haughtiness, you have what to back it up. You really are better than everybody else. And you feel it and you know it and you let everybody else know it. Boasting is fake. You know, you talk about how you had the greatest whatever back, but you're lying about it, right? It's just hot air, empty air as opposed to hot air. Va'atzus may say the offer. And laziness and depression, sadness, downness from earth, the element of earth, which is heavy. Okay, people who are sad are heavier. Lazy is a heaviness. So again, you can kind of figure out what your mizug might be, what your potion, Hashem's natural potion for you. Again, you don't know how much is nurture, but the inner makeup of your character, how much towards anger, how much towards lust, how much toward whatever it might be, is made up, is your natural character that's flowing through your veins. It's part of it. It's part of your nature. V'gam, and here's the big chiddush of this whole thing, this animal soul. V'gam midas on the top of Amud Aleph. V'gam midas ha'toves shebeteva kol Yisrael betul doisam kamei rachmanus mil chasadim bois mimenu. That also the good character traits that are natural to a Jew, such as they're inborn, such as being the signs of being a Jew, as I mentioned in the Gemara. Of them, two are mentioned here, being merciful and being kind. Also come from this klippa, from the second soul, which is klippa. Why is it klippa? How do we know it comes from the klippa soul? Because it's natural. Just like I have a natural character that's with all these other tendencies that are negative, I have a natural character to be drawn towards these good character traits. If it's going to be godly, it's got to take hard work. To reveal the deep godliness inside of every undertaking takes what's called a Veda, an inner deep dive inside of my psyche to transform myself to be beyond myself. Here, I have character traits that they might be selfless, but they're natural. And at the end of the day means it comes from my own character, my own self. That's klippa. Why does a Jew have natural character, klippa character traits, natural, that are good? How could it be? So it says the Alter Rebbe, Ki b'Yisrael nefesh zu de klippa hi miklipas nega. Because in a Jew, this klippa soul, this soul which is the vitalizing soul, the covering on godliness, not recognizing its godly core soul, comes from what's called klipas nega, which means a shiny shell. Sheish ba gam kein tev, which also has good in it. V'hi misoid eitz hadas tevera. And it's from the secret, the Kabbalistic reality of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which means that everything is mixed up of good and evil. So klipas nega, which is the shining shell, the vast majority of things in existence, have their godly core from the shiny shell. So too the natural soul of a Jew. What's the shiny soul? It means that the klipa, if you put a covering on something, it could be opaque, or it could be translucent. It could also be transparent, but here we're talking about more translucent. That there's sparks of the goodness, of the godliness that come through. They don't come through as clear light, or they don't come through as godly. They come through as good. Okay, so we're going to speak about what do you mean difference between God and good. Just one out. Okay, but what's the difference between godly, goodly, and what we'll call ra? Sometimes we're going to say good that is evil. Okay, so we're going to have three types of good. We have good that is actually evil in the language of Torah, in the language of Tanya, meaning we wouldn't necessarily call it evil, as we'll see in a second. The way we interact with our human neighbors, we wouldn't necessarily call it evil, but we're going to call it evil. Good that is evil. Good that is good, actually, but not godly, and then good that is actually true goodness and godly. Okay? To understand that, we have to say something a little more controversial. If you remember from last time we did this. This is not the case. We said that by a Jew, his natural and vitalizing animal soul come from klipas nega, the shiny shell, and therefore it has natural flowing through his veins and his nature of his character, also has good character traits. That's not the case with the souls of the nations of the world. Hein mishar klipas tameis. They come and derive from the other impure klipas. She'ein behem tev klal. That they have no good whatsoever. Dramatic pause. Like it says in the writings of the Arizal. So what do we mean by no good whatsoever? So we have two problems with that. Okay, not problems, two points on that. Number one is everything has good. We already said everything has a nefesh, even a rock. That's godliness. There's godliness embedded inside of everything that exists. It is the actual internal substance of everything that exists and the vitality of every vegetable, of every animal, of every human. So how can it be they have no good whatsoever? So we said the klipa, which covers on godliness, sometimes it's opaque. So it can't realize its own godliness. It can't actually connect. It's opaque. So in other words, for sure there's good, there's godliness there, but it's inaccessible. That's one point. The other point is right here, v'chol tivei de'avdin umes ha'ilam legarmeu avdin. So every good thing, all the kindness that the nations do, so on the one hand we're calling it good and kindness, but all that they do is for their own sake. They do it for selfish reasons. As it says in the Gemara on the pasuk, the kindness, again the pasuk says, the kindness of the nations, but then it says is sin. So we're not talking about their outright stealing, or anybody's outright stealing. That's obviously not good. So the kindness that they do is called sin. So we'll discuss it in a moment. That all the righteousness and kindness that the nations of the world do is only for their own sake. So what do we mean? So there are a lot of subtle levels here, okay? I preface by saying I could think of a lot of wonderful non-Jewish people that are kind and not looking to harm anybody. And I could think of a lot of Jews, unfortunately, Havdil, that don't fit in that category. Whether it's by nature or nurture or whatever, they're not necessarily. They sometimes do actually not only want to harm people, they outwardly harm people. So here I'm saying that Jews have good that's natural, and non-Jews, whatever they do, it's sin. So how does this work? So it depends on how we define good and evil. If good is selfless, godliness is beyond human, and evil is selfish, so this will put everything in perspective. And selfish, by the way, we have to define also, because there's different levels of selfish. So let's start with what we're calling evil. If I do you a favor, and I really just want to take advantage of you later, so what did you receive? A favor. You're like, oh, he's great. You're going to talk about it, and wonderful, all he does is favors, but really I'm just trying to set you up. So that's clear that the goodness that I did is really negative. What if I do a favor, and it's not that I'm looking to take advantage of you, but I'm waiting later, you're going to do me a favor? Still selfish. What if I do a favor, and I'm not trying to take advantage of you, I'm not trying to say later, oh, he's going to do me a favor, but I know that, what people are going to say about me, wow, that guy, he's great, he does everybody favors. Still selfish. There's an even deeper level. So the example is, if how about a bird? I wouldn't hurt a fly, and if a bird is suffering, I'll make sure to call the authorities to make sure to bring this bird back to health. If they don't come, I'll do it myself. So am I caring about the bird? Seems like it. But it could very well be that I just myself have a spot inside myself that can't stand to see the bird suffer. Okay, so I once asked a young student, a woman, a girl, who was in Save the Whales. So I was giving also a course on animal rights connected to the Torah's Tzar Ba'alei Chaim, don't harm animals, okay? So I asked her, save the whales, so why? Because they're animals, they're God's creatures. Okay, are you a vegetarian? Yeah. Okay, you want to, and I'd be a vegan too, from the way they treat the animals to get the milk and to get the eggs and so on. It's not about, I don't mind having the milk and having the eggs, but the way they're treated in the industry and so on is horrible, and I protest and so on and so forth. So great, do you kill a mosquito? Well, yeah, they can harm you. I said, what about a cockroach? So do you spray your house for cockroaches? You have them, absolutely. Okay, but what's the difference between the cockroach and the cat? The cat's cute. Haven't met anybody yet who thinks a cockroach is cute. Okay, so the relationship is really there's something nice about it. There's something even lofty about it. That I care for other creatures. There's something godly potentially about it. I care about other creatures, but there's a limit, and it's based on my own feelings. So that's some sort of an indicator, at least, that my relationship and my goodness is self-serving. Okay. Now again, I'd rather be a neighbor with somebody who's like save the whales, as long as they're not like crazy and like they want to beat up the people who don't save the whales. Like people go fishing, they get beat up. It's another story. So there's different levels. What the Alter Rebbe is saying, and it's somewhat of a hard pill to swallow. What the Alter Rebbe is saying is that when the kindness by a non-Jew, by the way, there's Chasidei Umas Ha'olam. There are non-Jews who can do true kindness. Okay, this special category. They've reached this category of Chasidei Umas Ha'olam, righteous Gentiles. They perform the 7 Noahide laws and so on. They could fit in this category. But when in a regular situation, a non-Jew is doing something, there's always going to be some ulterior motive. And by the way, he might be an amazing person who in his mind, again, he's not looking for anything in return, just wants to feel good. That's wonderful. We're saying by a Jew that natural to him, his kindness is natural, that he does it because a person is meant to be kind. In other words, not necessarily about what I don't need to or want to even subconsciously receive anything from it. But it's still not godly, because it's about being human as opposed to being godly. It's proper human behavior to treat people well because they deserve to be treated well, not because it makes me feel good or I have any other benefit from it. But that's humanity. That's inborn to a Jew. These traits of Rahmanis and Goimel Chasadim, compassionate and bestowing kindness. I think it's disproportionate tzedakah and charity in the world from Jews to non-Jews and so on and so forth. And it doesn't matter if they're religious or not religious. Okay, but then there's godly, and godly is a whole nother undertaking. I'm not kind because it's natural and because it's simple. It has nothing to do with me, even perfection of humanity. It's uplifting and elevating myself to a brand new level. So we have 3 types of goodness: godliness, which is totally beyond humanity. Goodness, which means being a human, understanding, and it's natural to a Jew, understanding that there's a way to behave based on objectivity, and then there's subjective. The Alter Rebbe was what time we have?
We're done.
We're done. I'll just tell the quick story. How many are we over?
Yeah, no, fine.
The Alter Rebbe was. They tell the story in conjunction with this last piece. The Alter was arrested and freed eventually. Yutes Kislev, our first class was Yutes Kislev, by the way, they asked him a bunch of questions. He was being tried for treason. He was the Malshinis. I don't remember. What? They informed on him based on his writings. He wants to overthrow the government. He talks about kingship of the Jewish people returning and so on. He doesn't believe in the Tsar. All these kinds of things. The death penalty. But they asked him a bunch of questions, and he answered them all, and they saw he's a very insightful human being, and they even probably sensed holiness there. And the last question they asked him was, you wrote in your book that all kindness of the non-Jews is sin. So the Alter Rebbe, this is what it says, the Alter Rebbe just smiled. And they didn't ask him anymore. They quote the Alter Rebbe later as saying that his intention with the smile was, I've answered everything already. You know that everything I answer you makes perfect sense. Are you sure you want me to answer this? And they understood. So very take good. It or leave it, but that's the emes.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Hit this? Yeah?
I just want to show it to you.
Oh, you're going to do it? Go ahead. This way.